I'm Spencer Hardy.
I'm Jake Kornfeld.
So we're part of the Farm Upstream. It's a 5-member cooperative growing vegetables, fruit, and native plants for our community in Jericho, Vermont.
I'm your host, Andy Chamberlain, and I take you behind the scenes with growers who share their strategy for achieving the triple bottom line of sustainability. These interviews unravel how they're building their business to balance success across people, profits, and our planet. One ask I have for you is if you can leave a comment or write a review. There's a feature enabled right now called Fan Mail, so you can send a message via text to the podcast right from the link in the description. These come through as anonymous, so if you want to be known or would like me to reply, let me know who you are in the message. Give it a whirl. It's quick, easy, and free, and I'd love to hear from you. One of the latest emails I received reads, "A big shout out to the Farmers Share podcast. I've been enjoying listening as I start the first seeds of the upcoming season. Thanks, Simone. Great to hear you're kicking off the season with some inspiration from others." Today's episode comes to you from Jericho, Vermont, where we visit with Spencer Hardy and Jake Kornfeld of the Farm Upstream. They're friends who are just setting roots on this new farm and share how they've structured their business to grow collaboratively to support multiple households. They share a little bit of the struggles of setting up a new business with multiple friends all at the same time, and share their visions for where they'd like to go with this business to turn it into a successful business for the long game.
So we are 2/5 of the Farm Upstream. This is our second year on a piece of land in Jericho. We started farming together as a cooperative in 2021 on leased land, growing a couple wholesale crops on the evenings and weekends, and then looking for property. And now we're here, and this is our scale up year from a 1-day-a-week farm stand to a 20 or 30 member CSA and a full season farm stand.
CSA is at 42 members and growing, Spencer. So
There you go.
I'm Jake Kornfeld. That's Spencer Hardy. The other three are doing various bits of childcare and education and things. So we've been growing together since 2021, but have known each other for longer. I grew up with Spencer in the Upper Valley, and all of us had been farming before we started farming together. So, I've managed the Vermont Youth Conservation Corps farm for the last 6 seasons and grew on a bunch of different farms before that. My partner, Corey, was the vegetable manager at Bread and Butter Farm for a while, and Spencer's partner, Jack,
She managed the Feast Farm in Montpelier for a few years and had been farming in Virginia and California a little bit before that.
Yeah. And then we snagged Tucker Andrews, or Tucker snagged us, more accurately, probably 2 years ago. Tucker's been operating Bone Mountain Farm up in Bolton for the last 7 years or so, and has been in this area for his whole life and is a really talented grower, and kind of cold called me 3 years ago just to say, hey, I'm kind of getting tired of doing this by myself. Do you have any interest in working together? And we knew each other through some friends. We already had 4 of us in the business and figured what's one more. And Tucker also had his eye on this farm. And so we kind of joined forces to pull off this land purchase and step things up a little bit.
And then in 2024, Tucker's farm in Bolton was devastated by some freak flooding in July, and which sort of sped up the transition to him moving his operation to this new property 5 miles away and out of the floodplain.
Yeah.
So is he going to be doing much of anything over there, or is it mostly over here now?
I think nearly everything he's going to be doing in 2025 is going to be down here.
Wow.
So he'll grow a couple seed crops up there. He's got a tunnel up there that we'll use, but that field is pretty rough at this point. I mean, he's like, I've got to figure out how much work I want to do to put it back together because there's a river running through the field. Yeah. rough.
So it's not just like it's unpredictable, but it's unfarmable.
The river moved, and now every time it rains, like more than an inch, there's water rushing through the field.
Yeah.
And it's a gravel bed.
Yeah. Not great growing conditions.
No, certainly not.
But you've got space here and room to expand, right? To a certain extent.
Yeah, we're still figuring out how much farmable acreage we have, but it seems like it's somewhere between 15 and 18 acres.
I was going to say like 5 to 12. Depends on how you count it.
Yeah.
It depends on how risky we want to be. There's a nice lower field of some really nice soil, but potentially within the 100-year floodplain.
Yeah.
And if that's every 10 years, is that a worthwhile investment?
Right.
Yep.
So 5 to 15, let's say. I'd like to think it's on the upper side of that.
Depending how risky you want to be, and you haven't really turned it all over yet, right? To see what it looks like. So
Tucker flipped like 4 to 6 in the fall in this upper field that's stony, but certainly out of the floodplain and has nice and flat.
Yeah. I mean, it's good. It's good soil, and there's definitely room for us to do a lot here, but it will hit a point with 5 of us that will have to be very efficient with our space.
right. Yeah, that's a lot. Yeah. So, are you how's your business structured? Are you a cooperative, or how's that working? Like, what'd you set it up? Because that's really unique to have 5 people like literally working in the same business together.
So we are a multi-member LLC.
Okay.
We looked into cooperatives when we were forming, but
Yeah.
in Vermont, you need at least 5 members, and we started with 4.
And we were kind of advised that until you get to like 12 or 13 members, you can just structure everything internally as a cooperative and not file taxes as a cooperative or do any of those things that require some extra hoops. And so this works well for us. We have some pretty burly operating agreements that sort of spell out the way that profit is shared and how things are divvied up in all the worst case scenarios, and have Digger's Mirth Farm in the Intervale to thank for that. They just passed us theirs because they've been doing this successfully for 30 years and through a lot of different ownership transitions. So, yeah.
One thing that we did that I think is kind of interesting, and I'm still debating whether or not it was the right move, but the farm existed as an LLC prior to this farm purchase, but we formed a second LLC to own the land and the farmhouse where we are currently. So that and there were a bunch of reasons for that, but it allows the farm to stay small in the assets, and it's easier, keeps the buy-in cost low for future members to join, and allows people to leave without sinking the business, because if it had the property value attached to it, it would be a whole different calculus.
And it lets us sort of invest in this house and farm as a home and think about like building equity for ourselves as people who took that risk to buy the land, but also lets us run a farm business without, like Spencer said, sort of tying it to all that debt.
Yeah, that makes sense to separate that. How does having an LLC for the house work? Because like the house isn't a business,
Right, and it's caused a lot of issues with efficiency of Vermont and current use and all these other things that are used to houses being owned by individuals. But it's an LLC that only owns the land and the non-movable structures on the land. Basically, we decided that it would own the house and the barn, but greenhouses and most of the field infrastructure is owned by the farm. And
and then the farm business leases the.
the farm upstream has a 25-year lease with the landholding LLC.
Okay, I see.
Yeah. And over time, we've sort of tiered it so that the farm will pay more rent every year and eventually be able to cover the mortgage and property taxes and all that jazz.
Right, as things scale up. That makes sense.
Definitely confusing from a tax perspective.
Yeah, I think hopefully after we've done this, a couple of times, it'll be smooth. But right now, everything is a little bit of an exercise.
Yeah, right. You're just trying to figure out the flow of things. especially as the income starts, as a slow to ramp up too. So, how'd you figure out how to structure this unique business this way? Did you have guidance or?
I think we have seen a few folks do similar things. I mean, there was a collaborative farming podcast a few years ago that did a handful of episodes that were somewhat helpful. Diggers was definitely really useful. I think we worked with the Intervale Center and NOFA, and they were down to be flexible and sort of think creatively with us.
Talked to Land for Good, I think was maybe one of the original places we got the idea of the two LLCs. We also talked to Matt Kropf at the Vermont Collaborative something.
Cooperative business development sort of organization. But he was a really helpful resource. So yeah, just talked to a lot of advisors and tried to piece it together from a mix of like, what do we want? What have other people done? What fits our context?
In hindsight, we probably should have talked to a tax advisor beforehand, but those are hard to find, it turns out.
And we run into this thing over and over again where like we'll talk to a lawyer and they'll be like, I'm not a tax accountant. And then we'll talk to a tax accountant and they'll be like, well, I'm not a lawyer. Yeah. And then you end up not getting an answer to your question because nobody wants to answer it because they're not sure what the answer is. So we've just had to like do it and hope that it's the right thing. And it's been okay so far.
Yeah. Figure it out as you go along and do the best you can. I mean, that's all you can do, I suppose.
Yeah.
So what crops are you growing? And let's see. So you mentioned a CSA and a few wholesale stuff, but what are the things you're trying to sell?
Primarily this year, it's diversified organic produce. So sort of your garden staples, things that people will come to a roadside farm stand expecting to find: tomatoes and cucumbers and summer squash and lettuce and all that good stuff. Then there's some more interesting things happening sort of on the periphery of that. So that's, for this season, definitely the enterprise with the most anticipated revenue. And then Spencer's got a sort of fruit enterprise that's picking up steam as the seasons go by and things start to become mature, and a native plant enterprise as well. And then Tucker's wholesale endeavor through Brown Mountain, he sort of talked to his buyers and said, hey, come with me to the farm upstream. I'm going to do a little less, but still a lot of winter squash, shallots, radicchio, things that he's done pretty successfully in the past. And so that'll sort of complement the direct sales, but also be its own cash flow.
Yeah.
Yeah, so my background is working in an apple orchard for several years down in the Champlain Valley, and getting excited about perennial crops there. Obviously, it's a lot longer to get started, so I've got some apples in the ground that hopefully will become the basis of an orchard in 3-4 years. And then my non-farm job is involved pollinator conservation, and through that I've seen this need for native pollinator plants for restoration projects and for landscapers and homeowners. So we've started a small nursery here growing Vermont native flowering shrubs primarily, but some riparian restoration projects, planting stock, some potted stock that'll be available through our farm stand, and trying to see what that becomes over the next couple of years.
Yep. You said vegetables are the thing you're thinking is going to bring the most revenue at this point, this next year?
Yeah, for a while, I think. You know, it's kind of like we know how to do that pretty well. We know how the math works. And, you know, it's on an annual basis, so we can sort of scale that up more predictably, and then hopefully that creates some space for these longer term enterprises in the native plants and the orchards to pick up steam sort of on the periphery. And then already, I mean, Spencer got some raspberries and stuff in the ground last year, and so we offered a little fruit add-on to our CSA, and you know, we were like, we can do 10 shares this year. And I mean, they sold out instantly. It was like a week in, and everybody who bought a CSA also bought the fruit add-on. So there's clearly interest in fresh fruits, and I don't think it's going going to hit a ceiling anytime soon. So I think it's sort of a matter of how much work we can put into it and how consistently we can get crops that are marketable.
Yeah. It seems like there's definitely a hot market for fruit, and right in this local area, there's not a lot of it. So,
and the hope with doing it through a CSA model is that we can educate customers up front about organic fruit, and that they come into it with the expectation that it might not be the prettiest apple they've ever eaten, but it was grown without insecticides and fungicides.
And it's going to taste really good.
And it's going to hopefully be really good. And then it gives us a little, and having as much of a diversity of fruit available, we can sort of play the weather and pest pressures over the years. Keep it small but diverse.
Yep. You guys talked a little bit about how you got started farming, but what made you decide to do this?
No one thing. I think, it's Spencer and Corey and I all worked at Maple Wind Farm together and lived together in Richmond, and kind of had talked about it very informally. And then I think we all probably have a different narrative of how this came about.
After Maple, and I took a desk job, I was getting sick of my desk job, basically.
Spencer did a PhD for like a month.
In agroecology, and quickly decided that I was more interested in the actual doing the thing than quantifying it with complicated formulas.
And then, Spencer and Jack were like, we're going to try to buy a farm. And Corey and I were kind of like, wait up. Like, we want to join, because there was also a reality for us of like what we saw as a viable farm and what we wanted to be able to farm was not within our price range. Like a property like this, even after conservation and everything, I think it would have been hard to pull off with any one family unit. And so we were able to think a lot bigger when we joined forces with Spencer and Jack, and then eventually Tucker. So I think that's part of it. And then the other piece is like a lot of what, I'll speak for myself, what made me nervous about starting a farm, because I've thought about starting my own farm for a decade now, and it took a while to finally feel like it was the right time and like I wanted to actually do it. And part of what helped me get there was thinking about doing it with other people, because I just don't want to be that farmer who never gets a day off the farm, who can't afford to get sick, who can't afford for anything bad to happen. That's just not my life and not what I want my life to be. And so to have friends who we trust to do this alongside gives us pretty awesome flexibility. Even last summer, we were running our farm stand one day a week, but we didn't need to be there every weekend. It's like, okay, we'll set up a schedule, and Jack will be on this day, and Spencer will be on the next Saturday, and I'll be on the Saturday after that. So it's one Saturday a month that I'm giving up to stock the farm stand instead of every day of the week.
Yeah, that makes it much more reasonable.
Yeah.
A little less daunting.
Yeah.
Still more than enough tasks and everybody can complete, but at least you have somebody to share it with.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, thinking back over the last couple of seasons, like I'm just blown away by people who are doing this by themselves. Like I went to the Veg and Berry conference, and Hannah over at Boneyard Farm, like her story sounded a lot like ours, but it's her and her husband and their 2 kids. And I'm like, holy crap, that sounds really intense. And, our journey over the last couple of years has also felt pretty intense, but also people have been able to pick up slack for each other when things have been hard. So that's maybe my favorite thing about this model so far, is just the shared risk, shared reward piece.
What are you excited about in this next year of farming?
I'm really excited to see how the farm stand is received by the community. We had a good reception the one day we grew open last fall, but hoping to build that into our main outlet. So getting to know the neighbors in the community and getting people to stop by on a regular basis and get excited about it, I think, is what I'm optimistic will happen, and we'll see.
Yeah, this community has been really welcoming. Jericho and Underhill have been just awesome. I mean, there's this Jericho Underhill Food Hub group that has just like reached out on multiple occasions to offer us support in various ways, and the town conservation reserve fund helped pay for the purchase of the farm. Like, just everywhere we look around this farm, there's little, reminders. The person we bought it from lives across the street, and this feels like the first season where we're in a position to really meaningfully start to offer something of value to the community. And that feels great and is really exciting. And hopefully we've connected with people in a way that they know we're here and they actually will show up to engage.
What marketing strategies are you using to try to reach the neighbors and let them know you're here with veggies?
Front Porch Forum has been our go-to so far, and it's been pretty productive. Got some flyers up. We honestly haven't spent a lot of effort in the marketing yet, and I think that's something that none of us were experts in coming into this project, and something we need to figure out. But I was just looking at getting a sign up on the road, like through the town.
That's a good idea.
$175. You got to mail the check and you got to figure out the black signs that say whatever 1.2 miles that way. You got to follow their rules, but it's doable, and just got to figure out where it needs to be.
Yeah, I mean, we're maybe a mile and a half from Route 15, and then a mile from Brown's Trace Road, which also sees a lot of traffic. Brown's Trace, excuse me. And I think if we can get some of that commuter traffic to stop by, that'll be sort of the, lifeblood of the farm stand at a certain point.
Last year we just hung an open flag, and that drew in a fair number of people that were walking and driving down the road.
Yeah. That Jericho Underhill Food Hub group, I mean, one of the things that they did that was awesome is they sent out a mailer to every household in those two towns listing what farms are around and what they have to offer. And so we were able to get in on that, and that totally rocked. Instagram we're on, but not super consistently, and that's about the extent of it so far.
Yeah, I think that mailer really was a nice addition that the Food Hub was able to do. So for the listeners, I'm a neighbor to the farm upstream here. I'm the next town over in Underhill, and so I benefit from that Food Hub. That it's kind of like a bunch of we'll say retirees that just want to support local food, and so they're just reaching out to us and trying to figure out how do we support local farms, because we like it. We like agriculture in our town, and so one of the initiatives that they did this last year, they just started the year or two ago here, and was offer this mailer, and that's something that wouldn't have necessarily crossed my mind because it'd been pretty expensive to send out a flyer advertising ourselves. But the fact that they were able to do that and advertise, the 6 or 12 farms that are within the region I think was a big help, because a lot of people stopped by our farm as well and was like, hey, we saw you guys on the flyer. That's cool. And
nice.
I think it caused a little bit of confusion because they were like, how do we sign up for your CSA? Well, I'm like, well, we don't have one, but reach out to these other farms. But it's still helpful to get the word out and let people know that we're around. So I think that was good. If you could wave a magic wand, what enterprise would you want to take off?
Take off our plate or have take off?
Have take off. Yeah. If you could really focus on the fruit or the nursery crops or the veg crops, is there one that you'd be like, man, I would love to see that really ramp up?
I feel like the fruit has the most room to grow, and there's a market for fruit, and I think the trick is going to be producing decent quality fruit organically and consistently.
Yeah, half my brain wants that same thing. Half my brain just really enjoys the work of growing vegetables and just wants to do that. But I don't have a lot of experience growing fruit yet, so maybe I'll feel that way about the fruit in 10 years. So
fair enough.
Yeah, I think it would be really awesome if that enterprise were to get some solid legs.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. It's a little bit of a probably a question mark at this point, but what's the 10-year outlook look like, or what do you envision the farm will turn into?
I think one of the things that we come to a lot is that we want people to come to us. We aren't really interested in, driving all over Chittenden County, dropping off boxes of food to restaurants and grocery stores. We'll definitely do that because I think there's, anybody who wants our food, we're going to work with. But we'd like to be a hub for the community and have a bustling farm stand and a robust CSA program and, be a place where folks come to pick up their CSA and hang out for an hour, and their kids are playing in the yard. And that's, I think, a big part of the vision, is just being a space that is welcoming and attractive to people, and that can also support us. So I think right now, we're sort of set up. This year will be our first year that any of us is really going to take a meaningful owner draw from the business. And so in 10 years, I'd hope that there's the opportunity, at least for all of us, to be getting a full-time income from the farm.
We've talked a little bit about trying to expand the diversity of produce or products that are offered through the farm stand, and trying to round out a diet and round out the season with being open as much as we can through the winter, and either buying in meat or raising some of our own animals so that people can do a lot of their shopping here.
Yeah, I think we'd love to have some chickens. We'd love to have a little bit of beef. But we're also wary of stretching ourselves too thin. And, it seems like the trend is that people start with 6 enterprises, and then after a couple of years, they're down to 1 or 2. And so we're trying to pace ourselves. The
beauty of having 5 owners, managers, is that we can all sort of take our own enterprise and run with that, and have that take up our headspace. And sure, I'm going to help with weed the carrots and whatnot this summer, but I don't have to think about the details of how that's going to happen. I can plug in as needed and use my limited brain power on fruit and the native plant nursery. And I know Corey's talked about taking off a flower CSA or a flower enterprise, and there's future enterprises that can be spun off with owner managers.
Yeah. So aside from a bit of an enterprise split, have you guys kind of established certain roles for each of your team members, or how's that kind of shaken down? I'm sure it's kind of happened naturally if it wasn't from the start.
So the enterprise is sort of the major split, and then the administrative part, we've sort of each taken little bits that we are most excited about. Jake does all of our certifications. I've been doing the bookkeeping. Jack's been managing the CSA this winter, getting the signups rolling, and then Corey's been doing our marketing.
I'm the secretary. I'm the only one who takes notes. I think a lot of it too is still shaking out though, because like bookkeeping is turning out to be a huge job, and like certifications, like that doesn't really take very much time, right? So there's some more to be figured out, but I think it'll also evolve in time. Like Spencer and Jack have a 10-month-old, and that gives them certain considerations, just like they can't maybe be out in the field as much, but they can do more tagging of things in Embrook. Or not. Maybe the opposite is true. I don't know. Yeah.
Certainly can't do as much as we were doing a year ago.
Yeah.
And this season's, been a trick because you've been renovating the farmhouse too. We haven't mentioned that. So like, I guess maybe if you could talk about some of those challenges that you've faced this last year as you're trying to build a farm in addition to a homestead.
Yeah, so it's an 1836 farmhouse that was structurally in pretty good shape. Needed some updates, electrical and plumbing and all that fun stuff. And we, in the process, decided it made most sense to split it into a duplex so that we can all live here. Our easement doesn't really make it easy for us to build additional housing, and but there's enough space in the house. We split it into a duplex. We hired a contractor to design it and get us started, and then sometime this summer basically ran out of money, so we took over doing it ourselves. I spent more time hanging sheetrock than I actually, or painting and insulation and all the house things than I did farming.
By far.
And next week, Jake and Corey are moving in, and we'll be settling into a place where the house doesn't need as much attention. There's still trim and all endless projects, but hopefully this summer we can focus more on the farming.
Yeah, I mean, it was a huge hurdle, honestly. It was really hard because we wanted to, we constrained what we were doing on the farm, even though there felt like there was so much momentum. Like, we didn't really come into the community quietly, I think. You know, it was like a pretty public project. It's right on a visible road. People wanted to know what was happening with the farm. We got public funds for it, and I think folks wanted the opportunity to see what was up, and we wanted to capitalize on that energy. And so to sort of like throttle that and focus on a longer term project was difficult. And we're not builders. We learned a lot in the last year, valuable skills, but hard-earned skills. I don't know, I got so spun out one day last summer that I just was like running out of the basement and whacked my head on the threshold so hard that I gave myself a concussion. And like, that's the kind of crap that you get into when you're, you know, just a little too spread thin. And I'm really glad that we're done with that phase. I'm so excited to have a growing season where the focus is on growing food. And Tucker is really talented with a lot of the infrastructure stuff, and so he'll have the flexibility this year to sort of help us get that stuff online. We got a really awesome Family Farmer of the Month award from NOFA to sort of make our farm stand a little more legit. Hopefully that'll get us to 4-season farm stand capabilities. We're getting a prop house up right now and have an equip grant that we'll get 2 tunnels up for, but TBD if that money exists anymore. So
it's a little bit riskier of an investment.
Yeah. I mean, we're really kind of playing a wait and see game on that one right now. But yeah, I think trying to figure out how we were going to live here. Like Spencer and Jack lived in a yurt for the last year with a newborn. That is not easy. Very impressive, and very glad that they don't have to spend half their day just managing their living situation anymore. Yeah.
You're not the only farmers that have, moved into or acquired an old farmhouse that you mentioned needing some minor renovations like electrical and plumbing. No, you stripped this to the bone.
Yeah, we kept the box. That's about it.
Do you have any lessons learned, any advice for other people who might be tackling a housing project in addition to a farm?
Man, I don't know. I think maybe I feel so nervous to give anybody advice on this because I don't think I haven't done well with it.
It's going to cost twice as much as you think it's going to.
Oh, you can take way
Everyone
That's
told
a
us
good one,
that.
yeah.
And we said, no, we can do the work. We can help out ourselves, and we can cut the costs, and we can buy salvage stuff, and it still costs twice as much as we thought it was going to.
And I think lean into the things that you actually want to do and have any capability for, and pay somebody to do the stuff that really just you don't want to get into. Like, I don't mind doing the plumbing and the electrical, and so we were pretty involved in that where we could be, and we didn't want to hang sheetrock, so we mostly got a contractor to do that for us, So just trying to be choosy with where we spent our money.
Yeah, I think that was the catch, because we built our house too, and I think that was the hard part, is that I had a very detailed budget and thought through all the plans very thoroughly and had a pretty darn good, number to work from and whatnot. But then stuff just comes up that you don't expect that costs more. And when you're planning to build your forever house, you're like, well, I'm not going to cut that corner.
Right.
Like, now is the time to do it. Like, the walls are torn apart. Like, if I'm going to, add in this little thing here and a little thing there and reinforce that, it's like, well, now's the time to do it. And now all of a sudden you've spent significantly more than you were hoping for.
Yeah, I mean, that was a pretty intentional conversation we had as a group at the kind of the outset of it. Was like, do we want to do the bare minimum and really invest in the farm, or do we want to make a house that we want to live in for the next 40 years and slow down the farm a little bit? And, I think time will also tell if that was the right decision, because I think right now I'm feeling pretty excited about it. And one of the things that's really great about where we are is, like, if the farm isn't able to support us all, we're in a populated enough area that there is opportunity for us to supplement off-farm income pretty easily, hopefully. And Yeah, so I think that was kind of that was the decision we came to, is that we'd rather invest in a space that'll serve us well for the next, chapter of our lives, and then be able to focus on the farm. And in the scheme of things, it's taken us, a year and a half, and hopefully 5 years from now, that'll feel like a short chapter.
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. A hard, intense chapter.
Yeah. Which I'm sure the next chapter is going to be a breeze,
It's just different. How has the land trust, because this is a conserved property and whatnot, how has that relationship been, or agreement been, like, knowing that you, like, were barely farming the first year? Like, I'm sure they are understanding of that, but, like, do they have certain rules that you must have a farm of a certain size, or just that, like, you keep it in production to a certain degree? I don't know.
I'll just say that this wouldn't have happened without the land trust, and they bought the development rights at the same time that we closed on the property, and which was the only way that it was remotely approachable. And they've been really understanding, and that there, as far as I know, there aren't strict guidelines about how much you have to be producing, but you have to keep the land in a way that it can be farmed in the future. So you can't.
Okay.
If they said that if we let the field go into a forest, they might come in with a brush hog and clear it for us.
Okay.
Yeah, the land trust puts no pressure on us at this point. They're legally entitled to have a say in development on the property. So there are rules around, like, if we build a new barn, there's different levels of oversight depending on what it is, how we're using it, where it is. For example, if we wanted to put a pick your own shed at the far end of our field, which is outside of our farmstead complex, we would need their permission for that. Mm-hmm. But if we wanted to just put up another little outbuilding right next to the house, that's not a big deal. And then in terms of production pressure, there's none. I mean, we could stop farming tomorrow and the land trust would still have a property that is agricultural soils that was taken out of development, and that's what their goal is.
Okay.
They do request that we not do anything agricultural within 50 feet of the edge of the river. Mm-hmm. So we've got a decent stretch of Lee River, and this spring we're with the help of the Conservation District, we're planting a bunch of trees in the riparian buffer to fulfill that requirement that we keep it out of production and that it becomes forested.
Yeah.
Well, that's not too bad. Then I had the assumption that it was a requirement that, like, an active farm be on a land trust property or whatever. But
there was some vetting of us as we needed to have a robust business plan and some experience before they would work with us on this project.
Fair enough.
Yeah. I think they wanted to trust that we weren't just trying to leverage their resources to, like, have a nice place to live. We actually do intend to give this a go. And it's not just the land trust, right? It's like the land trust is sort of the coordinator, and the money actually comes through the Vermont Housing and Conservation Board and the USDA and a bunch of other entities. And so you also have to meet their criteria. So, like, for USDA, we had to show that we had 3+ years of farm management experience or something like that. And VHCB really wanted to know what happened if one of us died, which is a great question.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Because you ran out of the basement too fast because you're strict.
It's not off the table. Like,
yeah.
I'm a high risk character. I don't know.
Well, you're only building a house and a farm and working off farm too. Oy, oy, oy. What fulfills you in this career?
I love the endless problems there are to solve, and there's always something interesting and some new skill that you need to learn really quickly to get something done.
Yeah, it's never boring.
No.
And when it is, it's really nice. Like, when it's boring, you're like, oh, this is a great time to catch my breath. I love the relationships. I think that farming lends itself to conversation and connection that a lot of other ways you spend your time really don't. And yeah, so building relationships with our little team of 5 and our neighbors and people we sell food to and people we buy supplies from and all that. Like, it's just an awesome network to be a part of, and that's what makes it actually appealing to me at the end of the day, is like getting to connect with humans. And also, actually, I mean, no, I take that back. If the humans were not involved, I would really enjoy just being connected with the land as well. So, yeah, a lot of great connection.
What skills have you recently acquired that you wish maybe you had coming into these projects?
I would like to be a licensed plumber, a licensed electrician, a contractor. I think just a lot of the infrastructure skills, which are hard things to get when you don't own land. Like, it's risk that I was fine taking on our own farm, but it's not risk that a lot of other people are down to have you take on their properties. So,
and then all of the administrative stuff of bookkeeping and tax accounting, and there's a lot of that I wasn't anticipating that has been time consuming and new skills to learn.
Yeah, it almost feels like the ability to grow food is sort of like the thing that would have been easier to pick up in some ways. It's like how to run a business and how to do all the peripheral stuff is what's been challenging in the last 2 years.
It's just such a steep learning curve. Mm-hmm. Like you said, not the growing aside, like that's your baseline. That's what gets you in the door. But
right. Yeah, and that's where you want to be spending your time, right?
Yeah,
that's
right.
Why we're here, but
not in QuickBooks and figuring out how to pay people and receive payments and all of that.
Yep.
And then the tax stuff and then multiple LLCs. It's like, duh.
Yeah. But that's also one of the appealing things is like we're farmers, we're also small business owners, we're also contractors of our own projects.
Mm-hmm.
And, it is always something to learn and a fire to put out and, well, hopefully not, but a problem to solve, which is engaging.
After you've plumbed a bathroom, all of a sudden irrigation isn't so intimidating.
Or you realize why your irrigation keeps exploding because you did some really dumb stuff, but live and learn.
Who's been an inspiration or a mentor or an influence for you guys?
I think the best cooperative model that we've found and sort of early on that we built our operating agreements and our understanding around was from Digger's Mirth down in the Intervale. They were really helpful in getting us going in that direction.
And inspiring in that Hillary at Diggers was willing to be like a formal mentor for us through the NOFA Farm Beginnings program, and shared that like they can pay themselves and they can take time when they need it and just generally seem like happy, well-adjusted people, and that is not something that you always see in farmers, right? And so that was really, I think, a breath of fresh air. I don't know. I think Vermont is just chock full of great role models and people who I've found inspiring. I mean, I listen to most episodes of your podcast, and I'm always like, that was a really valuable insight. And I got to do a NOFA soil health cohort for the last 2 years and just have met a bunch of awesome growers through that and had to, gotten to like have some really good, frank, honest conversation with them. We have some friends, Corey and I have some friends in Michigan who are really talented farmers. They also run a cooperative business, and they've been great mentors and role models. So no shortage of people to look up to, which is a great place to be.
Anybody who stood out that really you've gleaned from?
Yeah, there's so many people that I've worked for or worked with and gotten to see over the years that have little bits of wisdom and are doing what we want to be doing and doing it successfully. Windfall Orchards down in Cornwall is where I spent a lot of time. Got to see the apple world. Maple Wind, of course, with their poultry and vegetable operations when we were there.
Yeah, they're ones who've since dropped the veggies.
Yeah, I think we were there right at the tail end of their veggie enterprise, but they're just good people and have continued to be friends and mentors, and cheerleaders as this has unfolded.
As you're planning to scale up and ramp up the farm, what key pieces of infrastructure are you investing in, and in what order?
The prop house was our big, and the farm stand were the two big projects for this winter, spring.
Yeah, I feel like farm stand is number one because that's a big piece of our business plan and our sort of aspiration for the farm. And it needs a certain level of, it needs power. It needs a good door. It needs ventilation, it needs to be not scary to look at. So that was sort of number one. And then getting some kind of covered growing space. So we just put up a 21 by 96 foot ledge wood that will serve as a propagation space, but we don't need all that for propagation, so it'll be a tomato tunnel too. We got to borrow a friend's excavator in the fall and dug a bunch of frost-free hydrants and leveled some pads for more high tunnels. So
there was a lot of infrastructure projects that were sort of tangential to the house that, like, we put in a well and we oversized it so that we could have irrigation from the well. We ran a bunch of hard line 6 feet down out into the fields. We've oversized our electrical panels. We have panels everywhere that someday we might use for something.
Yeah.
So I feel like we've got the base, we've got the land, and now we can start thinking about the farm infrastructure that we're actually going to use.
Yeah.
We have a tractor coming in a week or so, which is thrilling. We've been operating with a BCS, and Jack's dad gave Jack and Spencer a Farmall Super A as a wedding gift. It's awesome,
1951.
It's useful, but it has its limits. So we have a nice Kubota MX 5200 coming from Pennsylvania next week. That'll be a game changer, I think. Just the ability to move stuff around, the ability to do field work. It's, not everybody on our team is particularly mechanically inclined, so we opted for something that is really accessible, and hopefully won't spend our time constantly fixing tractors. Tucker has a nice fleet of chronically broken tractors. One of them is currently sitting permanently dead, like outside of the house right now.
Oh no. First piece of lawn art.
Yeah, exactly.
Now the property actually came with like 2 or 3 tractors already dead.
There's some skeletons in the woods. Yeah.
So is that an open cab, hydrostatic, front end loader kind of compact tractor? Yep.
Exactly. Yeah.
Nice.
Yeah.
Seems like a pretty common piece of infrastructure for a farm like this.
The next big investment that we got to figure out at some point is how to keep the deer out of the fields.
Yeah.
It was surprising how much of the woody perennials they decided they wanted to eat last summer. They didn't really touch the vegetables till it got cold, but they'll be back.
Yeah. Yeah, they know we're here now, so our grace period is over.
Yeah, especially if you're thinking fruit and native plants.
Yep.
They love tender little native plants.
Yep.
So you guys both have a fair amount of farming experience at other locations. What was like a day that like just felt really successful for you? And you're like, boy, this is great. I want to farm all the time.
There's nothing that beats a September day climbing a tree picking apples. I could do that all day, every day.
Yeah. I think my first season managing a farm and stepping into a farm that was running a 400-member CSA, and like that first day of loading up all the shares for delivery and just being like, holy crap, this worked, was really satisfying, and being like, I can do this. This is a good challenge to be a part of.
Yeah, and if you're part of a system like that, all of a sudden it doesn't seem so daunting to do it on your own either.
Right.
You've seen it happen.
Yeah.
On the contrary, what's a time when you felt really challenged farming?
I think as I've gotten a better picture of what it means to financially survive on a small farm I have had some days that have felt challenging, just sort of like when things aren't going well, being like, man, how is this ever going to work? And I'm still hopeful, I think because we have good mentors and we have people who we can look at and say, it's working for somebody, like we're smart, we can figure this out. But just building spreadsheets that don't come out the way you want them to is one of the things that I'm currently finding challenging.
Yeah, I tried to put together a layer enterprise this spring, having seen the price of eggs recently, and even at $7 or $8 a dozen, it was hard to make that math work out well for a small flock, and it's a good reality check.
Yeah.
Here's a kind of a key question of the show. What does sustainable farming mean to you, and how are you achieving it?
That second part is definitely a TBD for us.
Or how are you striving for it, I should say, maybe.
I mean, I think it's fascinating. Like over time, I think getting into it, that question was all environmentally, ecologically focused for me. And over time, that becomes less and less of my focus. Like it's still, maybe because I've kind of figured out what the realities of that are. Like farming is a pretty high disturbance, high input, high output kind of endeavor. And so there's ecological realities there, and we can do our best, but we're confined by the conditions that we find ourselves in. So that's a piece of it for me, but more and more it becomes about like, can this sustain me and my family and give us a livelihood that's not full of stress and is full of the rewards that we know it can be on the good days. Can I have health insurance? Can I afford to fix my car? Those kinds of things. So I think that financial sustainability piece is becoming much more front of mind. And in terms of how we're striving for it, I think we're just trying to be organized and be honest with ourselves and check in with our values pretty frequently. And look for a lot of help from the people who know how to do it better than us. So really grateful to farmers who give us the time of day and business advisors who work with us and all that.
One aspect of the native plant nursery that I'm excited about is to increase the quality or the diversity of local ecotypes that are available for agroforestry projects and for riparian buffer plantings and for other landowners and land managers that are wanting to do the right thing by their land, whatever that might mean, and to be able to do it with locally grown native plants that aren't necessarily widely available in the state.
What are some of those species or crops or plants?
It seems like right now willows and dogwoods are the hot ticket for riparian plantings, some agroforestry applications too. But I think there's a lot of fun upland species, that oaks and hawthorns and things that are not that places like the Intervale Conservation Nursery aren't really focusing on, because there's a lot of money in the riparian restoration world. But I think it seems like there's a growing demand for upland agroforestry species that are feeding livestock or providing shade for livestock, and if those can be locally sourced native plants, all the better.
I think one of the things that I've heard from, I just sort of hang out on the periphery of this conversation, but is that a lot of the things that people are currently sourcing and able to source are, from the Midwest in large part, and it's the same species, but they're not adapted the same, and so they don't do as well here, and so they're not providing the same benefits to the ecosystem, and they're also not thriving as they might if they were sourced from Vermont genetics. And so Spencer's project here is trying to sort of scale up that offering of things that will do well because this is what they know.
Makes sense. I think just looping back to the sustainable farming to you and what you're doing to achieve it, I think we talked about it, and that's kind of why you focused on almost taking a step back with the farm, focusing on the house, focusing on your place of living, working off farm, and not just being like, I'm going to make a living off of selling lettuce. Like, you're taking your time and getting your feet underneath you before you're running, because you're playing the long game. And, you have the goal of being full-time farmers, and making a living off of that. But it's going to take time. I think that's how you're achieving it.
I appreciate your synthesizing that, Andy, because it's hard to remember those things and keep that picture in mind. So maybe I'll just pull up that sound bite on bad days. Right. It's the long game. That's what we're doing.
You're still in it,
Yeah, definitely.
We're sitting here next to shelves or cabinet pieces, and you haven't had that opportunity to like shift your focus yet, which I think you mentioned you're looking forward to doing.
Definitely.
Which is great. And it takes time, and you got to focus on the chapter you're in. Otherwise you'll screw up the next one.
Yeah, I think we're all learning to maybe just be present in the current challenge, which is challenging, right? Like when we want to be thinking about planting seeds and getting things going on the farm, and remembering that like actually these other chapters also have their moments of joy and interest, and that's not something that I'm particularly good at, but I would say is a skill I've gotten better at in the last year, of being like, okay, well, this is what you're doing, so find the value in it.
Trying to find the priority, setting up, and it's hard too, because you're trying to set up a prop house and plumb your kitchen sink. Like, they're both very important right now.
Right. Yep.
Now is probably a difficult time, but what are ways that you like to disconnect from farming or the stress of building up your life that allows you to unwind?
It's been great this winter just to be able to throw on a pair of skis and go out across the field and through the woods and see the farm that we own and that we get a chance to play with for a long time, hopefully.
Yeah, I too would say skiing is wonderful. But also, I think one of the things that was I don't think we expected to be able to stay in the community we've been in when we were looking for a farm. We were kind of like ready to move wherever, and Spencer and Jack had been living in Montpelier for the last few years. They had to move a bit, but their friends can still come visit, and we have a lot of community in this area. And so I think it's just really great to have friends and people who we enjoy seeing. And Spencer and Jack have a standing Friday evening pizza/taco night that you can actually put your name on a spreadsheet and get yourself a slot at the table. So things like that really are how we, I think, recharge and get ready for more.
Does that go year round, or is that just in the cold months?
We're going to try and keep it going year round. We'll see how realistic that is once there's things to do in the evening.
Yeah, right. When the daylight gets longer, I find that's the hard part for me. I don't stop till the sun sets, so it's nice come December or November. It forces you to get inside.
Definitely. One of the things, Andy, that I guess we're not going to be able to capture today, which is a bummer. We tried to pick a day when we could get more of us here, but such is life. And Spencer and I have our perspectives, but we also, we're both 31-year-old male people from the Upper Valley of Vermont, and like we share a lot of identities, and so have often similar perspectives, definitely not always, but like Tucker has 2 kids and has been in this town for most of his life, and Corey is also a social worker, and Jack is also a childcare provider, and so I think their answers to these questions would have been really different, and it would be a very different conversation with a different set of us here. And so it's one of the things I think I value about this, but also it's kind of a bummer that they can't participate in this conversation today.
Yeah, fair enough. I was hoping everybody could get on board, but understand why.
It's a rare day when all 5 of us are in the same room for extended period of time.
Or a brief period of time.
How do you think some of their answers might have differed from yours? I mean, you guys ought to know your wives pretty well.
You'd hope. I think Corey always leads with gratitude and community, and she's interestingly sort of like emerged as one of the more conservative voices in our endeavors. Like, she's often the one to be like, well, hang on, can we really support that? And is that really how we need to spend our time? And I think it's a role she's taking on very begrudgingly. It's not how she wants to see herself, but you know, she's just someone who's trying to be very thoughtful and intentional in the way we move, whereas I might be a little more ready to shoot from the hip. Corey's like, nope, take your time. Where do we actually need to put our efforts?
I think Jack is the least connected to this part of the state and this community, having not lived here before we moved to Jericho. And I think it'll be interesting to see. It would have been interesting to hear her perspective on how we can build this farm into a community space that is valuable for the community and fulfills our own needs and wants for social interaction and for a deep-seated community that's supportive of us and that we're supportive of as best we can.
Mm-hmm.
Are there particular aspects of the farm or business that they really get excited about, separate from you guys?
Yeah, I mean, Jack is going to be our like point person for CSA pickup this summer, which I'm excited to see her in that role. And I know I get kind of antsy in those settings. Like, I'd rather be still moving things around. And Corey really wants to grow flowers and just really high quality produce in a way that I don't know how to do, to be honest. She's better at it than I am, so we'll see that evolve, which will be fun.
Yeah, and Jack and I are navigating the child care dance as we figure out our schedules for the summer, but she's excited about it all. She's excited to weave it all together and define the spaces where there's room and where there's other things that can be added.
Yeah. And Tucker just kind of is unflappable as far as I can tell. Like, he's definitely the chillest person I know. And,
he's also secretly our best marketer in that he
knows
confronts everybody that he knows and tells them to sign up for our CSA or else.
Yeah.
So far it's been really successful.
He's talked to about 40 different people.
Yeah, exactly.
That's good. Well, he's a few years ahead. He's been doing this. He's been selling crops
dug
for
into
a
this
while,
community in a way that we definitely are not yet.
Yeah.
Yeah. Those were most of my questions. Is there anything else that you guys want to share that I didn't bring up?
Two-factor authentication is the bane of our existence.
Somebody
as you can imagine, with
figure that out. Yes.
one cell phone number per account and 5 people trying to access the account and in 5 different parts of the town.
I've only overdrawn the bank account once. And it was because I was in Lowe's and I just was like, I think we have the cash in there, and I could not access it because of freaking two-factor authentication and c'est la vie. But also, I think just sort of in the spirit of this podcast, like just saying again that I think we're all very grateful to be in the community that we're in and the community of growers that we're in, because we've all learned tremendous amounts from people we've worked for and have been peers with. And I have a hard time imagining doing this in a different setting. So I'm grateful to projects like this for existing and for people who are willing to spend their time this way. And
there's so much institutional support in Vermont from nonprofits and even from the state government that makes this possible. Whereas in a lot of states, I don't know that we could afford this. We could make it happen. We could get off the ground even.
Yeah.
Perfect. Well, thanks for coming on the show.
Thank you, Andy.
Yeah, thank you.
Appreciate you.
And that was the Farmer's Share. I hope you enjoy this episode with Spencer and Jake from the farm Upstream. The Farmer's Share is supported by a grant offered by the USDA Specialty Crop Block Program from the Vermont Agency of Agriculture, Food, and Markets. This funding helps to cover some of my time and travel in order to produce this podcast until March of 2026. The USDA Agricultural Marketing Service supports projects that address the needs of U.S. specialty crop growers and strengthens local and regional food systems. I have no doubt that this podcast will meet those needs and help educate growers to support the industry. If you enjoy this show and want to help support its programming, you can make a one-time or reoccurring donation on our website by visiting thefarmershare.com/support. This show is also supported by the Ag Engineering Program of the University of Vermont Extension. We also receive funding from the Vermont Vegetable and Berry Growers Association. The VVBGA is a nonprofit organization funded in 1976 to promote the economic, environmental, and social sustainability of vegetable and berry farming in Vermont. Their membership includes over 400 farms across Vermont and beyond, as well as about 50 businesses and organizations that provide products and services of all types to their members. Benefits to members include access to the VVBGA listserv to buy, sell plants and equipment, share farming information, and tap the vast experience of our growers. Access the Community Accreditation for Produce Safety, also known as CAPS. This program is designed for growers, by growers, to help you easily meet market and regulatory food safety expectations. You can access the VVBGA's Soil Health Platform, where you can organize all the soil tests and create and store your soil amendment plans and records. Access to webinars for growers in the VVBGA annual meeting, an email subscription to the Vermont Vegetable and Berry newsletter, camaraderie, enhanced communication, and fellowship among commercial growers. Memberships are on a per farm, per calendar year basis, and annual dues this year are $80. These funds pay for the organization's operating costs and support educational programs and research projects. These funds also support projects that address grower needs around ag engineering, high tunnel production, pest management, pollinators, produce safety, and soil health. Become a member today to be a part of and further support the veg and berry industry. You can visit thefarmershare.com to listen to previous interviews or see photos, videos, or links discussed from the conversation. If you don't want to miss the next episode, enter your email address on our website and you'll get a note in your inbox when the next one comes out. The Farmer's Share has a YouTube channel with videos from several of the farm visits. We're also on Instagram, and that's where you can be reminded about the latest episode or see photos from the visit. Lastly, if you're enjoying the show, I'd love it if you could write a review. In Apple Podcasts, just click on the show, scroll down to the bottom, and there you can leave 5 stars and a comment to help encourage new listeners to tune in. I'd also encourage you to share this episode with other grower friends or crew who you think would be inspiring for them. Thanks for listening.